Welcome, everybody. This is our second episode of our IMM Senior podcast, Between Two Lions. Today, our two hosts are Vincent Terraneo and Jamil Marshall. And today, we are joined by our lovely guest, Barbara Chamberlin. Would you like to introduce yourself, Barbara?
Thanks for having me. I'm a developer at New Mexico State University. We have kind of a nonprofit educational lab. We do apps, games, started doing VR, animations, video, websites, wide variety of topic, wide variety of content, wide variety of audiences. That's all I got to say about that.
All right, well, thank you for coming. I guess our first question is, how are you feeling right now about being interviewed by a bunch of college students?
I love it. I'm not sure I would use the same terminology that you did, Vincent. I think the terms you're looking for is, how do I feel about being interviewed by people who are coming into the field and are going to change it in a positive way? Awesome.
Appreciate that.
So what made you decide to work with educational games?
Oh, that's a good question, Jamil. The truth is, I kind of fell backwards into it, because back in my day, there really wasn't this as a field. You have to remember, when I was choosing my career, oh my gosh, the internet wasn't a thing, right? Games were kind of a thing. Educational games were extremely, extremely rare. So the idea that I could pick this as a career wasn't really an option for me, which speaks very powerfully to the idea that you all need to just choose what is most interesting to you and engaging to you at every moment, because you don't know what you're going to be doing in 30 years either. But I was working at a shop that was doing video production, and we were starting to do touchscreen kiosks, and that fascinated me. And the games were very simple at that point, but that was really like, wow, we can teach people in really engaging ways that's not just presenting information to them, but can then help them process in a different way. So that was what really fascinated me, is how do we help people learn or change in ways that they couldn't learn and change in other ways? And that's sort of what got me into it. And I'll tell you, the two things that really set my brain on fire was, one, it was a living book series with Mark Schlichting, and seeing how they could do these interactive books for kids and take something with a book, a child's book that has so much charm and wonder and incredible things about it, and plus it and make it better. That made me say, okay, here we go. Technology is going to contribute in meaningful ways. And then the second moment that really changed me is, we'd been looking at the internet primarily as a place to share information at that time in the early days. People didn't even have URLs at that point, right? It was very early. People were putting content up. And I saw the interactive frog dissection that Mabel Kinsey did at University of Virginia. And I'm like, okay, this is how the web is going to change things. It brings interactivity to learning. Sign me up. And so those two things set me onto the path now.
It's very insightful. Yeah, it's crazy to see the progression of the use of the internet and technology within this learning field. So that's great.
Right. See, I'm not that old. Like, look at me, like, I'm not that old. We're just going to put that there and pretend that's the case. I'm not that old. But when you look back at when I started my career, how different technology was, it's really powerful to think, where are you all going to be in 30 years when you're creating? And we know the technology is going to be different. That's a given, right? But what's really exciting is, how do we help people change their lives using technology? How is that going to progress? And hopefully it's not just doing the same things with bells and whistles. Hopefully it's doing things in significantly different ways that really technology is bringing its best self to. And that's, that's in your hands, my hands, that's in all of our hands, to make sure technology is making those changes in positive ways.
Okay, that's great. So you're the director of the Learning Games Lab, or project director, right? So can you tell us about that? Like, what's it like working there? What do you guys do there?
Yeah. So our shop is called Innovative Media Research and Extension. That's the formal name of the department. And we have a web group that does web. We have a multimedia group that does all interactive labs, VR, to some extent our animations, and then we have a video group that does video. And all of those groups have sort of ebbed and flowed over the past years in terms of what the biggest trend is. but we have tremendous people in each of those teams that also work with each other. One of my things is that one of the difference between our shop and other shops that you might find is, first, we're focused on education, right? And I like Jesse Schell in his shop uses the word transformation. I like that better because it's not just education, it's behavior change, it's social change, sometimes it's physiological change, sometimes it's emotional change. So that's one thing, is everything we do is focused on some kind of positive change. But the other thing is, we're at a university, so everything is research based. So we don't get to make things just based on our opinion or research in quotes, right? It's on research. So we do 4 kinds of research. We do the kind of research that's formative in terms of what's the need, what's out there, how should this content be delivered, what do we know about best practices for this content or transition change, that kind of needs analysis and initial work. We do user testing, where when we are in developing, we do a lot of testing with sample clients, early versions, all the iterations of user testing that you see, and eventually into quality assurance is part of that as well. And then we do summative research in terms of this product that's out there now, in what ways did it impact users, for whom did it have the greatest impact? And then we have process research, which is, how did this process work? How do we help? One of the things we just did is, how do we create a framework for studios to make games accessible? How do we help developers think through that in a meaningful way? And so the Learning Games Lab is a physical space as well, where we can do some of our user testing and have people use the products that we have in development.
I did get the chance to play a few before we did the interview. I did
Oh,
notice
great.
they were generally pretty fun.
Oh, thanks, Vincent.
Like,
which ones did you play? Because you're not a 6th grade math learner, so that's
Yeah.
awesome that you enjoyed some of the Maths Next ones.
Yeah, I think it was.
I'm putting you on the spot.
What was it called? Curse
Reverse.
Curse Reverse. That was it. That was interesting. And the pearl diving one.
Yes.
Yes.
Pearl diving is a very different way to help kids think about number sense,
Yeah.
which is something we don't really think about, young kids having to learn number sense. What does number sense mean? Number sense includes what negative and positive mean. It means that decimals and fractions and whole numbers are the same numbers, right?
Yeah.
And then curse reverse is a different way to kind of walk people gradually into algebra, where at no point do we say, this is algebra, this is what you do in algebra. You're just playing a game. And then by the time you're done with the game, you're like, holy cow, I'm writing a whole thing with efficients and variables and coefficients. And I know what it means. So those are cool. I'm glad you like this.
Yeah, I'm reminded. I did play some math games when I was little, and they weren't as fun as that one. I remember, was it?
Oh, yeah.
Time to Attack was the one I remember playing, and it was just doing
drill and kill.
math, but
Yeah.
in a dungeon.
Yeah. It's like, are you good at math? Reward. If not, loser. A lot of older games kind of reinforce. The example I give is like, the only people who like playing Trivial Pursuit are the people who are good at Trivial Pursuit. And if you don't know the answer, you just feel worse about yourself. Like, that is not how you transform people in meaningful ways.
Yeah. All right, do you really want to go for the next one?
Got you. And to dig a little deeper, so how as designers and media creators do you go about making learning fun?
Yes. Okay. So 2 things on that. One way we do that is, I think everybody in our shop has to do that, right? It's not just an instructional designer's goal or this, you're in charge of fun and you're in charge of program. Everybody in our shop is responsible for that. And that's one of the things I love about our team is I like give a tour and introduce people and be like, oh, they're an animator and this is one of our coders. But really, everybody across the top is an instructional designer, and then they implement that in different ways. And the second thing I like, one of my favorite quotes, one of the people, Warren introduced me to, Darren Carson, says, learning is fun. Our job is to not mess that up. And really, and you see it in the constructivist mindset, right? The whole idea of engaging in a meaningful way to make meaning out of things, to find how you can improve. Those things are inherently fun. Understanding and seeing and recognizing that you couldn't do this thing before and you can do it now, that is fun. Getting a bit of information that is meaningful to you because you just had other information and you're synthesizing that and you're putting that together, where you have one of those aha moments and you're like, that means this. That is fun. So I think one of the things we let go is there's a difference between the ways to make things fun and ways to engage people. And a lot of the things we talk about, like great graphics or good feedback or a usable interface or a story or powerful emotions, they can make them fun, sure, but that's not really what we mean. What we mean is we're using those things to engage people in an activity which should inherently be fun. So we were talking about cursorverse earlier. If we were to say learning about variables and coefficients, how do we make that fun? Well, it's not to put cool music and great graphics on it, though I think cursorverse has good graphics on it. It's to engage you in a way that applying those things has meaning at the moment, and then it gives you control over how to manipulate those things in a way that you can solve problems. When you are able to do that, and I'm able to create an environment where you can do that, you are engaged and it is fun. That doesn't mean when you go out into the world, you're like, algebra is so much fun. No, that's not, that's not our goal. Our goal is for you, while you are engaging in solving problems and using the notation of variables and using them in the way they should be done, you feel good about yourself, you can see your progress, you can master this. That is what's engaging and fun about it. Did that answer your question, Jamil?
Oh no, it answered it perfectly. I feel like that's
Okay.
something that we all can, like we all can relate to and all like can dig deeper into. Is like how do we make things more engaging and more enjoyable for people to play.
I feel like people, again, of my generation, because we grew up with games that were somewhat simpler, we look at fun as being the primary goal, right? And so then we're like, if there's this thing I think is fun, we could just kind of shoehorn in the education, and it's a little less fun, but people won't mind as much because it's also educational. And I think that's really a very old-fashioned approach. I think the better approach is, how do we engage people in things that are personally meaningful to them, helping them realize what's relevant to them? How do we engage people in this process of improvement and learning and transformation? Because that inherently is something we like. When you look at things like lifelong learning movement, the lifelong kindergarten, for all of that. The point is, we want to keep everybody in kindergarten. The point is, we want to have everybody find a path to enjoying challenge, new things, wonder, experimentation. We, for some reason, allow that in kindergarten when we don't always allow it in the rest of our life. So it's not that kindergarten is limited, it's that the limitations are removed in kindergarten and we want to remove those elsewhere. And that's our job in gaming and all the experiences we're creating, is not finding the fun per se, it's in revealing what is inherently engaging and enjoyable in the things we want to present. Another quote I have from up on my board here from Scott Osterwald, who did Zimbinis, which is another really well-known math game, is he said, we didn't, I can't read it because it's around my wall, so I might not get it right. But he said, we didn't want to teach them math. We wanted them to enjoy the things we enjoyed playing with. And that was a really great way to look at that.
Great.
What are some of the challenges with integrating tech into the modern day classroom?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. So we don't do just classrooms. So I'm going to expand that a little bit to say that we do a lot of informal learning. We do some formal as well. What are the barriers? You know, sometimes the barriers aren't the barriers. Sometimes the barriers are people thinking there's barriers. That's, I think, one of our issues. And math is a good example of that. Getting math games into a math classroom is tricky. Sometimes you might have a teacher who doesn't think games fit. Sometimes you might have a teacher who thinks games are just to be played in that extra time that the really smart students have when they finish their lesson. And that's not the best approach. Sometimes you just have to get a computer lab for the math classroom, which you can't do because so sometimes there's some of those barriers. Sometimes it's a game and they have new laptops, but there's a firewall, so there's just tech issues with that, or their Chromebooks are too old, so there's definitely some of those tech issues. I think we always, in the field of technology, we have to accept that there's always what I'll call the plug-in problem, right? There's some issue we don't know, the battery doesn't work, or there's a file. We always have some of that. So the solution to that is just make sure there's always support on site for those kinds of things. I like to focus really on the other issues about technology integration, which is usually mindset. How do we help people who are gatekeepers feel okay about teaching games? One of our grad students, she's now a postdoc here on Math Snacks, did an additional study. Her dissertation was on how teachers use these math games in the classroom. So we did a whole bunch of work about the Math Snacks games, and she focused in on case studies with teachers. And what she found is the teachers really evolved their thinking about the roles games play. And where they had previously thought games were for practice or games were for spare time, free time use, they were able to see, I not only feel more comfortable picking out games, but I see now that games can be good for letting students experiment and play and be introduced to content. Those are the barriers I think more about, is the gatekeepers and how to really enable different kinds of play and think about it. And that's true with parents, it's true with kids, it's true with teachers. I don't mean to pick on teachers. It's true of whoever the gatekeeper is working with them.
All right. I guess one more question before we move on to opening up questions to the rest of the class.
Okay.
Jamil, which question should we pick? Yeah.
I think I have a very important one here.
Okay.
So very important, as I said, do you like fish?
Do I like fish, like to eat or like as a pet?
Your choice, your choice.
Yeah.
You watched your what was it, dating math video?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yes. Fish. Oh, I get what you see. So can I tell you a story about that dating math video, which really launched my research in user testing, that individual video. It was really interesting because we kind of had this funny aspect that we wanted to use to tell the story of ratios. And so it was actually gender swapped. And so we had a woman who was doing all this talking and the guys were off. And so we tested it and they were like, oh, it's fine. And then I went into the bathroom in between the break and I heard these two women saying, oh my gosh, can you believe that video we just watched? And I'm like, what? And they're like, I know, it just plays into all the stereotypes of women being too dominant and talking so much. And it was hard for me to watch. And so I went out there and I was like, why didn't you say any of this in the group? And they said, because we were in a group and you didn't want to do it. And so I reframed how you have to ask questions, how you have to get feedback, because I didn't realize that something that could hurt someone or be offensive to them, that they weren't in a place where they could be like, whoa, hey, yo, you kind of offended me with the way you did that. So what came out of that was we completely restructured it. Instead of having it be just one couple, we had it be one person with several. So there was something really positive that came out of that. And I think in a way I know it absolutely made the end animation much better. But my other favorite story about dating, one of the Mass Next animations, Bad Date, is we knew we had it. You know what? I was talking before we started the official podcast about being a comic and about the joy of telling a joke or having everybody in the room have that same moment of emotion. When we sent Bad Date out and we started testing it in groups, and for those of you who haven't seen it, you go through this whole thing until ultimately the date, they're trying to get the exact same number of words spoken and they're one word off. So one looks at the table and goes, bread. And then they're like, oh, and they fall in love. And so we knew we had, in terms of assessment, when we would go into a classroom weeks later and kids would all be saying something and there'd be a pause in the conversation and someone would go, bread. We had a great animation there. So that's a really fun example of how user testing informs our product, but also, multiple terms of assessment for when you've got the right product done.
Okay, well, that's great. Guess anyone who wants to ask a question, they can come up and go in front of the camera there and ask away.
I can start. First of all, thank you, Two Lions. You rocked it. That was great.
Good job.
Good job. Especially Jamil.
Thanks.
That on.
Vincent's like, I'm right here, Warren.
You guys,
you both did a
you guys
great
want to
job.
ask a question? Come on up, stand right here, take on your mask, ask a question. My question is, so you have to go to the bathroom to do your user testing? Is that what you're telling us?
Yeah, no, I realized that might have been the takeaway from that. But ironically, one of the things we do that I do very intentionally in our design summits is I use breaks very intentionally, so that when we're kind of designing and maybe you get to a point, and I really kind of intentionally create breaks and use food in the room to break people up. And when we go to lunch, I very intentionally think about how I put people in different cars to really and how I sit people at tables for lunch to really foster those side conversations, because part of design is realizing what happens in the big room isn't everything. There's side conversations. So it's really important to build in breaks, to have the evening we'll go out. We usually go out to a place here. It's called White Sands. And we have kind of a nature experience so that the next day people are able to give feedback. People need to be able to give feedback in lots of different ways, because what works for one person may not work for another. So the takeaway there is if it's a bathroom conversation, fine. Just enable lots of different ways to have feedback.
Any questions from you guys? Come on up. Yeah, take her down.
So Warren loves telling us that there's a lot of dough in making educational games. So I wanted to know, but he never specifies how you make that money. So I want to know, how do you make money making educational games? Who do you talk to? Do you look for grants? Do you look for specific people? What are the kind of steps for that?
Okay, so if you're talking how do you personally make money, make a lot of money making games, I would like you to take my information and get back to me when you find the answer to that question. I work at a university, which is awesome, and it has its own benefit and a great dental plan. So there's, a lot of things I love about this job. If you want to make money personally, I would recommend you start a studio and build it as a business. I don't think you make money as games. I think you make money as a business owner. Now, having said that, how do we get money for our games? Our shop, again, is a little different because we're university based. Almost everything is grants. So a large part of my job, it's not the most fun part, but a large part of my job is writing grants. It's interesting. I'm the interim department head right now for our department. And so I have to write up the description of what the department head needs to do. And I was just working on that yesterday. And one of the skills was excellent verbal and written communication. And that's important for me to write grants because I have to be able to give the pitch. But I think even if you are not department head, you are going to have to learn how to pitch. And that pitch might be a 25-page grant proposal. That's how I do my pitches. Your pitch might be a PowerPoint presentation. Your pitch might be a one-page document. Your pitch might be an introductory email. Everything we do sits on the basis of excellent communication skills. You have to be able to take this idea and articulate it in a short-term version and a longer version and in a visual version, whatever it is. You have to be able, and that's just getting the money, right? Once you develop, you have to be able to collaborate, talk to other people. Everything sits on the bedrock of good communication skills. So I'd say if there's one thing you can do moving into this field, make sure you know how to articulate your ideas clearly in writing and in person. But for us, it's writing grants. And often what that means that makes me different from someone who's a studio designer or a studio program. Studio, someone would say, hey, I want this game. And how much would it cost? And then go back and say, oh, okay, that's going to be, $300,000 or 0.6 million or whatever it is. We usually look the other way around, where we see a grant that says, okay, we have grants for 250,000, 1.5 million, whatever. And we want to teach this, this, or this. And so then we have to look at those things and say, okay, is there ways that games fit into that? So that's a little bit different. We usually start with general problems to be solved in a general budget and then design around that. Whereas other game developers might start with, hey, I have an idea, this is what I want to do. And then they go to the budget that way. So our projects, that's one reason our projects range. It's what are the needs that funding agencies are funding and that our partners bring to us. So right now we're working on some VR for dietetics. One of the things about COVID is that students who want to become registered dietitians have a hard time getting their face-to-face internship hours in. So we're doing some interviewing things on VR where they get to practice all of the different aspects of what comes from those personal interviewing for dietetics. I think we're also going to be doing a VR on microcrusts and biomes and soils, which is super cool. It's like tardigrades. Oh my God, I'm so excited about that. And then we're doing some games on, we're doing some interactives on not washing your chicken, because this is a crucial problem of how people are spreading pathogens by rinsing chicken in their kitchens. And so nobody really wants to learn. Nobody's out there going, I wonder if I should wash my chicken or not. So we have to find ways to engage them in that. We're doing some things for microgreens growers, people who are growing microgreens, and some of the safety, because those are some food safety concerns that were brought up to us by some of the funding agencies.
Okay. Yeah, Ryan.
Hi, so I was just wondering, I know in the games industry, they measure success based on copies sold, current user base, money made. I just want to know, for educational games, is there a different key metrics that you track for success? How do you value the intangible parts of it? Just
Yeah.
just
Oh, that's
about
such a
that.
great question. Such a great approach, Ryan. Yes. In very few, well, I can't stand on my soapbox too much about that. I'm never going to have the distribution numbers that a AAA game would, right? But the other thing is I don't want to chase that as a metric of success, because in some regards, maybe what we're trying to do is not get as many people as we can to learn this one thing. Maybe what we're trying to do is to hone in on this very specific audience that hasn't been able to make the change they need to, and everything else we've tried doesn't work. So we're going to try this. That would be the metric we're looking at for them. With our math is kind of a tricky thing to measure because math is cumulative. Everything you learn helps you learn the next thing. So sometimes it's going to be your success is going to be in 11th grade because of what we said in 6th grade. That's really hard to measure. So sometimes we look at how engaged they are. Sometimes we look at just simple knowledge gain. Sometimes we look at, can they do a thing that we know through research is usually correlated to them being able to do a thing later. So I think the important takeaway from this is not what's the way you measure it. It's to know that in every single project, you should know what's the way we measure it. And that's going to differ based on your goals.
Any other questions from you guys? Yeah, we'll make the last one. You come on up here so we can get it properly on camera. All right, Bart, we're almost done. The advice I'm getting from her is become a stand-up comic. So you can
that's one way. That was my path. That's not necessarily everybody's path.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jonathan. Very simple question. What's your favorite project that you worked on, if you've had one? I guess that isn't really a simple
I can't
question.
pick between my babies. Can't make me pick my favorite babies. My favorite project. Honestly, I don't have like the one project that I love. I have these collection of moments that were awesome days. When Ruth Torres Castillo, who did the research I mentioned earlier in MassNext, when she was sharing something, I think it was maybe when she was doing her PhD defense, and she had a quote for one of the teachers. It was something like, I realize now that games can be the most effective way to introduce concepts to kids so that then my expertise is to help them apply it in new ways. And when I heard that quote, I was just like, my life has not been wasted. Yes, yes, this is what game-based learning can do. So there was that kind of moment I loved. We had this game, Night of the Living Debt. It's a financial literacy game. And we've had moments where we've taken that out, and it works really well when you give like a group of three users an iPad, and then you have a bunch of groups in a room, and you have everybody play for 10 minutes, and you're like, okay, iPad's down. How do you win this game? And you give that to like 6th graders who've had no financial literacy training. And to hear a 6th grader be like, okay, here's the deal. You avoid the subpar loan guy at all costs. And what you want is a credit card that you just put small purchases on when you're starting, and get those small purchases and then pay them off every month. And then you can look at larger spend. And I'm just like, yes, this is what we want you to learn. So there's moments like that I just love. But there's other moments in development when you're just with a team and you're like, I can't solve this problem. This is too hard. How are we going to make it work? And then somehow through the magic of design and collaboration, someone has an idea and it gets energy and everyone's like, yes, that's going to work. That's one of those moments I love. So I can't say there's a favorite product because there's different things about all of them that I love. But I can tell you in my career, what keeps me in this are all of those little moments that make me feel like, yeah, I picked the right job. Because there's like 3 or 4 other careers that I know I probably could have done well and would have really enjoyed doing. But when I look at these moments, I'm like, yeah, I picked the right one. I picked the right one.
I think you'd be an awesome airline pilot, commander.
Oh yeah, I wanted to fly. When I was in high school, I thought I would be a math teacher, or I wanted to go into the Air Force and be a pilot, but my vision was too bad to go to the Air Force. And also I was not good at authority. So it's probably good I didn't go that path. And then I went to college and was like, to be a math teacher, I have to take a lot of math. Oh. And so I was so delighted when MassNext came along, and I was like, I can kind of be a math teacher. So I'd love to be a pilot though. That'd be
or the one question, we have a lot of designers here and who will probably be watching this podcast, and do you have advice about tools? You mentioned VR. Are you guys using Unity, or are there tools that you think that if you were hiring one of our students, for example, what kind of tools would you like to have them have, and include like Trello. Do you guys use Trello, or do you?
Yeah, we use that a little bit. Yeah, we played with Trello and Slack. We using a program called Basecamp for our project management. There's a lot of them out there. What I would look for most, honestly, is what is the tool you use, and can you tell me how good you are at it? And I'll tell you, if you come in and say, I know everything there is to know about Unity, I'll be like, because it's impossible. Whenever someone would come in and be like, I know everything there is to Photoshop, I'm like, you don't even know what you don't know, right? So what I want to know is, what's the tool that you use? How have you progressed through that? How do you learn something within that tool that you don't know? What do you think that tool is good for? And if you have a good sense of that, great. Because I think it's like languages. The more languages you speak, the easier it is to learn any other language. It's not so much that I need you to be excellent at any one tool, although proficiency at any one tool is great. It's that I need to know how to become proficient in any one tool. So if I swap that tool out on you, because in the next 15 years of your career, you're not going to use just one tool, you know how to become proficient in those others. So is it tutorials that you use? Do you get into user groups? Do you do experimentation? What is the way you build proficiency with that tool? And if you can tell me what that is, good. Having said that, yeah, we use Unity. We do a lot of our own custom coding. We just took, I think it was 18 of our things from Flash. Some of those went into Unity, some of those went into HTML5. So it's always nice to have a bunch of tools, kind of different, but I would be most impressed with somebody who comes in and says, these are the tools I use. When I work on a project, I use this for this, I use this for this. Then I might take it into this program for this, but then ultimately it goes into this. This project I can prep, but I don't really know that tool well, but I know how to prep materials for somebody who does know that tool well. That's what I'm looking for, is somebody who understands what the tools are, knows how to use them, and knows how to collaborate with other people who knows those. And honestly, y'all, when you are entering your career, I am not expecting max proficiency in a tool. And if you come in with that, I'm not going to believe you, because you are entry level in this field. So come in kind of knowing this, I don't know the whole tool, but this is what I'm good at, and this is what I'd like to learn more on. That to me is an employee I can work with. Absolutely. That's what I'm looking for.
Wow. Well, Patrick, you want to come up and say bye? One of my pro tips, Barbara, is to find people who are smarter than me and bring them into my classes so that they can do some of the work that I was supposed to do. And you have proven that.
Well, I will tell y'all about Dr. Buckleitner here for a minute. He absolutely lives by that mantra, and the people he knows are incredible. He knows an incredible group of people. And the reason I know that is because he's brought me into that world, because he has given me an opportunity to come in and learn from other people. So there are a lot of important takeaways from Dr. Buckleitner, but one of the most important is find the people who know things you don't know and relish that and enjoy it, and put yourself into their orbit and be open to learning from them, because that's what he has given me. And if you take nothing out of his class but that is incredibly powerful, because it's rare. It's rare to find people who consistently, hungrily look for people who are smarter and better and say, what can I learn from this person? That's a great approach in life, but also in this field.
Thank you so much for taking your time out today. I know that I've gotten a lot out of this, so thank you. We really do appreciate it a lot.
Oh, well, you're welcome. It's my pleasure. It's such a joy to have a chance to interact a little bit with people who love the same thing you do. So all I can say is go out and make this field proud. Go take all of you, everything that you can do that other people don't know, or your experiences or your approaches. If there's some game or some approach or some kind of representation that you are not seeing out there, go put it out there, because our field only has what it has right now, and we need what you can bring to it. So bring your full selves to that. And don't try to make the things that are out there. Try to make things that are different, because your experiences are different and we want that. So bring it with you and make our field better.
Thank you to Vincent and Jamil. Excellent hosts. Would you guys like to close us out?
Thank you for coming on. I'm always really interested in educational media and what it can do. So I still have lots of questions, but we have to sign off. So again, love talking to you. This is great.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you for stopping by and sharing your knowledge. It's very insightful.
Oh yeah, Jamil, I'm happy to. And y'all, and you can leave this in the recording of the podcast. I'm very easy to find online. My email is bchamber@nmsu.edu. working as an department head, I'm not quite as responsive to emails as I would like to be, but I promise you I will get to them eventually. So drop me an email if you have some questions. I'd be happy to, or just want to chat about some, I'd be happy to do that.
Again, it was an absolute pleasure. And for
Thank you all.
coming.
We love you, Barbara. Thank you.
Oh, love back to you, Warren. Thank you all.